Who is this girl? Whose grave is this? What the fuck was that? Why are there monsters here? Is she going to die? Oh my god, it's anime.
残酷な天使のように少年よ神話になれ青い風が今胸のドアを叩いても私だけをただ見つめて微笑んでるあなたそっと触れるもの求めることに夢中で運命さえまだ知らない痛いけな瞳だけどいつか気づくでしょうその背中には未来目指すための羽があること残酷な天使の手で窓辺からやがて飛び立つほとばしる熱いパトスで思い出を裏切るならこの空を抱いて輝く少年よ神話になれ
The last time I made a video about RWBY, it was focused on the fandom. This time I'm focusing on the show itself. Trust me, there's plenty to talk about without focusing on roleplay servers. I'm a fan of long-form content, creators like Mauler, Rags, The Right Opinion, Atrocity Guide, and others. And what better way for me to test the waters than with my own series of RWBY analysis videos? Yes, it's been done to death. Sure, I'm probably not going to say anything new, but what I'm doing this for is a more selfish reason. I'm an aspiring writer, and writing fanfiction is something I find enjoyment in. I've written 2 well-liked RWBY stories so far, and have a few others planned. But the big one, the masterpiece of them all, is my RWBY rewrite. A RWBY rewrite happens when a fan of the show, such as myself, decides to try and write a version of the show that fixes the narrative problems that we find. Some rewrites are wildly different than the main show, while others follow the story more closely. The goals of my rewrite are to expand the lore exponentially, turning Remnant into a believable place with some science and maths behind it, while also giving the cast some much needed love and attention. Issues like the White Fang and Fauna's racism are being tweaked, and things like the Maidens and Semblances are more grounded instead of doing whatever the show needs them to do. With regards to the story, I want to try to follow the overall beats in the same way, and as it's been a few years since I've seen some of this content, I felt like I should rewatch it to better understand what I might change. That's where this series was birthed. Not only will I be rewatching the entirety of RWBY, all 8 volumes, but I will also be exploring the extra media Rooster Teeth has given us. I'll look at the E.Z. Myers trilogy of books, the numerous manga and comic adaptations, the Grim Eclipse game, the Combat Ready board game, and more. I'm going to be taking a critical eye to this show's universe and pointing out things that I like, things that I don't like, and things that I can't stand. This isn't meant to be a hate watch style of video, so if you're just here to listen to me shit on RWBY for however long this series goes, you may be in for a surprise. We're going to start where it all began, the trailers. RWBY is an odd show. It doesn't actually begin with Season 1, Episode 1. Most fans will tell you to watch the 4 trailers that were released first, in order to get the full experience. These actually aren't trailers in the normal sense. A trailer is designed to take pieces of the media advertised and splice it together in a way that drives viewers to see the full thing. RWBY's trailers are more like showcases for the animation, art style, and world of Remnant. They exist independent of the show, and despite the fandom's insistence, you are not required to see them before watching the show properly. I actually went back and saw them after I had finished Volume 3, and while I may have been able to glean some additional context for certain things, it didn't profoundly affect my experience. My sister, on the other hand, watched the trailers with me as I tried to introduce her to RWBY the right way, and was immediately turned off by the violence and dark tone. Weirdly enough, this is very fitting for later seasons of the show, but earlier ones are much more lighthearted than the trailers would let on. My advice to anybody willing to go through the show, watch the trailers, but realize the show itself is not nearly this intense, at least at first. On November 5th, 2012, the world got its first look at a new project from Rooster Teeth creator Monty Oum. The red trailer begins in a very striking way. A foreboding soundtrack leads us into a full moon on a snowy night, with red flower petals mixed in. We see a young-looking girl in gothic dress and a long red hooded cape, standing amidst a snow-covered landscape. At her feet is a gravestone. Immediately we have so many questions, but there's no time for that. The world's cutest anime protagonist then unveils her giant gun and begins slaughtering the black monsters that have come to attack her. But this isn't cool enough yet. Not for RWBY. The girl's weapon then transforms into a giant mechanical scythe. At this point, the black monsters should have probably just given up. The action that follows is purely meant to show off how absolutely bonkers the combat in RWBY is. It's quite literally all spectacle, with a giant middle finger to physics, and I love it. By the end of this fight, a tiny girl in a skirt has basically genocided an entire species of scary black wolves, leaving nothing but bullet casings in her wake. This is our first of 4 characters that will form the namesake of the show, Team RWBY. Her name is also Ruby. Ruby Rose to be specific. Yeah, I get it, it's intentional, but it's also really confusing when trying to explain this show to people. The red trailer is just fantastic. It's visually stunning, it's animated so fluidly, and even Casey Lee Williams' strained vocals can't ruin that banger that is Red Like Roses. If I had any complaints whatsoever, it's that, as awesome as it is, it's just not very representative of the show. Ruby Rose is goofy, awkward, and the most kind-hearted person. This trailer makes her out to be almost a killing machine with no emotion. It borders on psychopathic, the way she toys with her victims at times. It also kind of deflates the tension of later scenes from the show, when you realize RWBY took out like 50 monsters by herself with little trouble. Even with those minor nitpicks, this is still a classic piece of animation, and while I wasn't aware of RWBY until much later, I can only imagine the hype this trailer cost. The next trailer would drop on February 14th, 2013. It begins with a quote, "Everyone is entitled to their own sorrow, for the heart has no metrics or form of measure, and all of it irreplaceable." Personally, I love using quotes to set a scene, but I use good quotes. A good quote is one that is referenced time and time again throughout history because its meaning is timeless. This quote sounds like a teenager trying to be deep. It's the very definition of wide as an ocean but shallow as a puddle. It's supposed to give us insight to what we're about to see, but all I can get out of this is the character in this trailer is very sad. What a revelation. We get a small amount of dialogue this time as an announcer addresses a crowd and introduces Weiss Schnee. A pale-looking girl in mostly white garb with white hair and icy blue eyes takes center stage to a solemn piano track. It looks like she's performing in a large theater or possibly even an arena. She begins to sing and we get this cool shot sinking through the floor to another version of her in a darkened room. She's confronted by a giant suit of armor as the music picks up. Just like the red trailer, the white trailer features some impressive fight choreography, albeit in a different style. Weiss zips around the battlefield using strange symbols, and her weapon is a simple rapier with a revolver-like chamber. Another point I love about Weiss's fights is that Monty Oum, the show's combat animator, had proper respect for fencing technique. So many shows treat rapiers like normal swords, but while rapiers can slice to a degree, they are primarily piercing weapons. Even when Weiss slashes at the enemy, she's clearly connecting with the tip of her weapon, not the shaft like a regular sword. A confusing bit for me is always Weiss's scar. She gets punched in the face by the armor, and yet somehow that leaves a slender scar down her eye. I don't care how hard you punch someone, you won't leave a scar like that. Which brings me to another point. The fight itself. Some parts of the fandom claim that this fight is symbolic, since Weiss as a character deals with paternal abuse in her story, and that this is some sort of coping mechanism to explain her struggle and also her scar. The wiki, and apparently a chapter in one of the RWBY manga, however, indicate that this actually happened, which brings me back to how Weiss got a perfectly clean scar from this. The white trailer does a bit more than the red trailer as we get deeper themes, some bits of voice acting, and even crazier combat. It falters, however, when it comes to the larger show itself. Things like Weiss being a singer are only ever referenced once or twice in the show. We learn that her family is one of the richest, if not the richest, in all of Remnant, so it just baffles me why Weiss isn't some sort of Atlesian pop idol or recording artist. Well, we're halfway through, but those were arguably the better ones. Things go quite a bit downhill from here. Just over a month later, on March 22nd, 2013, the black trailer dropped. It was almost 2 minutes longer and showcased Rooster Teeth developing actual storyline threads mixed in with the showcases. We begin with another quote, I think. It's not in quotations, but I think that was their intention. This one is much better than the white trailer, as it's way easier to understand even before knowing the characters involved. The black trailer continues the use of striking visuals, with the moon, now shattered into pieces above a blood-red forest. You may have noticed the moon being slightly broken in the white trailer, but here it's on full display. The camera pans down to a... Wait a second. Why is she wearing her bow? Okay, I'm getting ahead of myself. This clearly normal human girl is staring at something when a man walks into frame. He calls her Blake and ominously informs her that it is time. Blake responds with,
Okay.
They're clearly still ironing out the voice work. Blake and her male counterpart, a red-haired man with horns wearing a black suit with a strange mask, run into a train and hop aboard. They drop in through a hatch and into a room full of very tough-looking robots. Alright, we need to talk about some things. Did they not have a plan for this heist? It doesn't really matter why they're here, but they immediately drop into a heavily armed train car, and all the robots here conveniently turn on so we can have a fight scene. The number of robots seems to fluctuate per angle, but they surround Blake and her friend, yet only one robot decides to morph his arms into miniguns, and even then, he seems to wait for the horned guy to attack. The robots look at each other, like they're dumbstruck humans or something, and then begin to attack, but not all at once. There's literally robots standing off to the side in strike distance, and they just do nothing. This is pretty typical for live-action set-piece fights, because you're usually supposed to keep your eye on the action and not off to the sides. But animation shouldn't need this, because you don't have stuntmen waiting for their cues or the danger of hurting someone. Blake and the other guy bust through the train car's door and are now on some flatbed cars where more robots are inbound. I guess the train is full of them. Once again, these robots with weapons run up to our heroes or just stand around watching. Seriously, they're robots. They should have no self-preservation instinct. Blake and the horny guy are fucked if they all decide to just open fire simultaneously. The guy opens a chest containing something. Looking behind them, we see crates with the Schnee Dust Company logo on them, a symbol that we briefly saw in the white trailer. So I guess it's dust? We don't get to see, but he tells Blake to move up to the next car. Blake suddenly cares about the crew of the train, despite the only things on board shown so far to be robots. Honestly, the only crew they really need is a two-man engineer team to drive, and even then the technology here seems capable of driving itself. Suddenly, a giant spider-mech thing drops out of the ceiling, somehow. It was completely concealed in shadow in this already enormous car, so the size of these train cars is just wildly inconsistent. From the outside, they look like normal-sized container crates, but on the inside, they're fucking huge.
Adam!
Oh. So that's his name. The Spider-Mech begins firing at them, which, if this is dust in these containers, that's an incredibly stupid idea. You're basically doing their job for them, moron. Bitch, are you dumb? Blake and Adam try to fight the mech, but it stomps them into the next flatbed car. No more regular robots, that would be too tough. Adam tells Blake to buy him some time, so she begins doing her acrobatic shit. I've always loved the way Blake fights, even though her weapon is like the most confusing thing in the show. It's a gun, a sickle, a sword, the sheath is also a weapon too, and it has the ribbon thing that Blake loves to show off with. It's cool as shit, but my mind just can't comprehend it. We also get to see Adam's semblance here, but weirdly enough it's not explained again until Volume 6. He absorbs energy into his sword and then can redirect it back out, so he takes the full brunt of the Spider-Mech's blast and uses it to decimate the thing. It's pretty cool. Then we get the dumbest part of this trailer. Adam runs to Blake, who has gone to the next flatbed. He stops, reaching out to her for some reason. She looks down at him all solemnly and just says,
Goodbye.
And slices the coupling in two. Damn, Gamble Shroud doesn't fuck around. The train continues on while Adam's car begins to lose momentum and Blake rides off into the sunset. Hold the fuck on. Adam, you moron.
You stupid.
Why did you just stop and reach out to her? Did you suspect something? You've made larger gaps than this in this trailer, so why don't you just jump onto her car and get her? Adam's entire arc going forward is all about how Blake abandoned him, and it's pretty clear there's a romantic element to it as well. But you let her get away, you dummy. Sadly, that's not the dumbest thing the trailers have to offer. The final trailer dropped after a bit of a longer wait on June 1st, 2013. At 5 minutes and 44 seconds, it's the longest of the set, and it contains the most story out of all. Consequently, it's also the worst trailer by far. Let's get into this. Oh, and I haven't read Roman Holiday yet, so the information I present here doesn't take those events into account, even if they matter. The trailer isn't all bad. It's got one of my favorite tunes in the entire soundtrack. It's actually a mashup of all 4 trailer themes with EDM influences. The choreography is mostly good too, and I like how it directly sets up the first episode. But that's about it. We begin with another quote, possibly, and it's back to middle school grade deep philosophy. Being symmetrical is not the same as being one-sided. Like, symmetry by its definition is 2 sides that are equal. That doesn't make them a single side. All this is trying to basically say is inner beauty blah blah blah, which is dumb because Yang is often considered the sexy one of the group anyway. This quote would fit better to someone like Weiss' stick figure looking ass.
No boobs.
The trailer begins with a blonde-haired girl riding a sleek-looking motorcycle. She stops at a pretty dingy-looking area of town and heads into a thumping nightclub. The dance floor is packed, but it's strange that there's no bouncer or door attendants. Also, for some reason, certain guys in the black are dancing with hatchets.
You best believe I keep a hatchet in my hand.
We get a brief shot of a ginger-haired man with a cane talking to a tall bearded guy, while 2 girls, one in white and one in red, sit nearby. It may seem unimportant, but it's the setup I mentioned earlier, and I'll probably talk about it more in my Volume 1 video. I've got enough to say in this one. The blonde approaches the bar and the bearded man shoos the twins away. They begin to converse and the bearded guy, Junior, is put under some pressure by the blonde to find someone. It's impossible to see what's on the phone she's holding up, but for context, the girl is looking for her mother. A bunch of identical looking thugs in black suits with red shades, the guys with the hatchets, come to their boss's aid.
Pull your hatchets and put them in the air, cause it's time for somebody to die in this bitch. Come on!
The girl plays things off as a joke and asks to kiss and make up before punching Junior clear across the room. She then proceeds to single-handedly body every single guard in the club, followed by the twin girls Melanie and Milsha, and then finally Junior himself, before blasting back outside to meet a familiar face. Ruby Rose, from the Red trailer, is just standing outside the club for some reason, and we finally learn the blonde's name. Yang. She's also Ruby's sister. Okay, I went through that kind of fast because there's so much I have issue with in this trailer, I'm going to do a second run through with more depth. The other trailer is so devoid of logic and common sense that it essentially boils down to just a 5-minute girl boss scene for Yang. She begins her rampage by assaulting Junior, presumably the man in charge of this place. Sexual assault actually, considering she's got him by the balls. There's no reason for this hostility. Yang could have just walked in and asked if Junior knew where her mother was. Maybe she gets angry because she thinks he's lying about not knowing, but that at least gives us a better setup. This is our first introduction to Yang and she's already a bitch. After seeing Junior's men approach, Yang decides they can kiss and make up, which is juvenile, but sure, whatever. Junior actually falls for this, despite commenting earlier that he thought Yang was too young to be in the club. This is only done so Yang can get this comical sucker punch in and knock Junior out of the fight until it's his turn. Oh, and she also knocks him through a giant structure of some sort, causing a panic as everyone evacuates. Just like with the fight in the Black trailer, there's lots of quick cuts, so you never really know how many goons Yang is fighting and where they're coming from. It's even more so here, because it seems like, despite fighting a horde of them, Yang is only on screen with 1 or 2 guys each shot. This eliminates the clunky looking onlookers, but lessens the impact of the fight scene since the animators are keeping her safe through editing tricks. The DJ begins firing a Tommy gun at Yang. He waited until all the other men were knocked out, of course, but she effortlessly dodges the hail of bullets and clocks him out on the decks. Now that the Goon Squad is out of the way, we come to 2 of my favorite characters in the show, Melanie and Miltiades Malachite. I love their designs, their weaponry, the crime syndicate underworld shtick, and the show never goes anywhere with it. They only ever appear once in the show, and it's for a gag. Also, I'm pretty sure this is the only time we ever see Yang reload Ember Celica. It's cool, but it's very impractical. The fight with the twins is better than the goons, but they still come at Yang in a way that makes it easy for her to defend herself. It looks flashy and cool, but they never try flanking her or coming at her from opposite angles. Yang knocks Melanie out for a moment so she and Milcha can have a 1v1. You've already shown that she can take them on simultaneously. The stakes have effectively been lowered here, not raised. Milcha does jack shit while Yang pummels her and then gets to work on Melanie again. This is my favorite part of the fight, mainly because characters that fight with their legs and feet are always so cool to me. There's only a few that do that in this show, and it's sad that Melanie's never used again. Despite Yang being shown to be a very blunt fighter, smashing into people and blasting them with explosives, she somehow becomes super skilled at footwork and waits for Melanie to make a mistake before hitting her with this admittedly badass roundhouse. Now Junior's back, because it's his turn. Literally, Melanie even gets up but is like,
"Fuck this shit, I'm out."
Junior's weapon is this neat bazooka bat combo, but even that's not enough for the mighty Yang. I'm actually impressed the animators allowed Yang to get thwacked a few times, but it's inconsequential. Yang's semblance comes into play now, a power that allows her to get stronger the more she's hit. She's basically a Super Saiyan.
I'm going to break you.
What?
Like a Kit Kat bar.
What?
She pummels Junior a bit before he accidentally rips out some of her hair. This enrages Yang to the point where she pulls a smash attack on Junior. The trailer ends here, but the amount of fuckery is just too damn high. Through both the trailer and the show, it's made pretty clear that Junior is into illicit business, a part of the criminal underworld of Vale. Yang just assaulted a very powerful and very dangerous man, beat up his entire entourage of goons, and demolished his club. We can add inciting panic onto that list because her hot-headed actions also caused the club's patrons to flee screaming. Oh, and the Malachite girls? Well, this is some Volume 6 shit, but they're the daughters of the most powerful crime boss in Mistral, Lil Miss Malachite of the Spiders. So that's 2 very powerful crime families that Yang has wronged, and nothing ever comes of it. Now, I've mentioned this before to other RWBY fans, and it's usually hand-waved off as
Junior's mafia, he wouldn't call the police,
or
they wouldn't be able to do anything because Yang's a beacon.
I can agree to an extent on the police, but just because Junior is part of a criminal organization doesn't mean he has no insurance. Yang cost thousands of dollars in damages, maybe more, and I highly doubt Junior would just take the loss. We know he rebuilds the club because Yang goes there in Volume 2, but even with illicit funds behind it, insurance can still exist. On to the next part about Yang being protected. The Brandwins got into Beacon to train to kill huntsmen, and they graduated. There is no reason to believe that the most powerful crime syndicates in Remnant wouldn't have operatives enrolled at combat schools and huntsman academies. A hit should have been put out on Yang. She should be dead for everything she's done here. But no, she suffers no consequences, and it's essentially played for laughs or just showing how much of a girl boss she is. Note, I'm adding this section because I did end up reading Roman Holiday, and that book deals a lot with the Spiders and the Zhongs, Junior's gang, so I felt I would just recontextualize some of what I've said. With the knowledge I got from the book, Yang should be double dead. Lil Miss nearly murders Roman Torchwick for using her daughters to try and barter with a rival gang faction. Yang beat them senseless, and they're absolutely the kind of girls who would run to their mother and get revenge on Yang. It's also revealed that the Zhongs have numerous men on the inside of the Vale PD, so having Yang arrested would be easy. The police are basically in the pockets of the crime bosses. One more minor bit of criticism, based on what we learned from the book, the Spiders and the Zhongs should absolutely despise each other. So it makes no sense that the Malachites are just chilling in what would essentially be enemy turf. Yes, they love clubbing, but this is too far. And for the people getting ready to type some comment about how a 2013 trailer is supposed to match perfectly with a 2021 book, the diehard fans regularly claim how things in RWBY have been planned from the start. If that's the case, someone should have told E.C. Myers that their book retroactively pokes holes in canon content. And with that, we are finally ready to begin the show proper. I've decided in advance, to keep the videos from being enormous, that I tackle each volume in 2 parts. So, for example, Next time we'll be looking at Volume 1, Episodes 1 through 8. Then in Part 2, we'll cover Episodes 9 through 16. I've also developed a timeline of which pieces of RWBY media I'll cover in order. It's typically going to go like this. 2 parts per volume, and in between volumes I'll talk about some other relevant content like books or games. As an example, I'll be talking about Roman Holiday in between volumes 1 and 2. Since the events predate the show, but Neapolitan, one of the main characters, isn't introduced until Volume 2. If you have any questions about my analysis, please leave a comment and I'll get back to everyone promptly. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Gotta do that YouTuber outro.
Which means before you were born!